Yeah.
effectively killing this conversation.
No,
That was a good thing.
Yes, let's be honest. That's probably for the best.
Oh, goodness. Let's see if... it says excellent connection. All right, yep, there it is.
Yeah, but will it be an excellent conversation?
Of course it will be.
Always.
All
It always is.
right.
I wouldn't
Because
know.
Added the reassurance.
Bill's here, and even I've turned up. Late. Although, actually, hold on 1 second. I just remembered something. 2 seconds.
No, you're even later now.
No, it's never enough with this guy.
I know, man. He's like, I left my scalpels in the sink.
It's just me.
Give him an inch. Takes him.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, okay.
We even started the stream and everything. All right, let's have the whole conversation before he comes back, and then let's just be gone.
It just, yeah, he comes
Linux
back
is
to
cool, right, guys? All right,
3
we'll
empty
see you later.
chairs. Linux is cool. There's our title.
Is it?
I don't know, is it?
It can be. It can be.
If I don't ask now, I'll forget at the end, and we'll all just leave.
Yeah,
Ooh,
I have.
what episode
I
number?
have been forcing myself to write more things down because I'm bad at remembering things.
I keep a note
Yeah.
here for this show and 3FT because, I mean, you know, Mintcast, it's kind of part of the workflow, but with these two shows, I have to think of something clever, and it's usually after the fact, and I suck at it.
Yeah, it's usually on Sunday.
I try to get everything done the day before, that way I can take Sunday off.
Yeah. I've got some editing ahead of me.
Do you edit? Do you edit for your show?
Me or Bill?
Or do you guys? You.
Yeah. I'm the guy.
He's
Oh, you're the guy.
He's
Okay,
the guy.
so you do it. Okay.
He's a good guy.
I'm the guy. No, like I find it very difficult to explain to somebody what I want to take out of a video. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I know.
conversationally. Like, I get like,
Yeah.
you know, when I take my shirt off, cut that part out. Like, okay, that makes sense. That's easy to do.
Right.
But, you know, it's like, well, anytime I say something about this, like, at that point, I'm going through the video myself and looking at every little thing that goes sideways, and I'm like, get rid of that.
But you know what? There,
we'll get rid of that.
It is. Editing is really I mean, not only in when you think of it historically, like with movies, and you know, it has such an impact on anything. You know, from the simplest conversation.
Well,
Yeah.
this sounds like
Most,
good
grandiose-
content. This
I
sounds
think
like
we're
good
recording,
content.
aren't we?
No,
going?
we are streaming, though.
Oh,
Damn it, Bill!
So
we're doing everything.
God.
we were waiting on Majid. Oh, Majid.
Let him
sorry,
say the
sorry.
thing.
Now,
Let him
Craig's
say
in
the
here. We're already on the show. Welcome to Linux OTC episode, whatever it is. Let's go.
I think it's 46. All right. I'm going to do a 3, 2, 1 record, though. That way I can get the silence.
We just say Craig. No.
Craig's going. Craig did get all of the fun conversation.
That's what I'm saying.
3, 2, 1, record. And that was good enough.
Okay. Just holding my breath the whole time.
Is that why you went blue?
Yeah.
Turn a little blue
true.
there. Linux OTC. Welcome to episode 46. I'm Bill.
I'm Eric.
I'm Majid.
And I'm still the other guy.
The other guy.
You got to be a little bit more creative, man.
What do you mean?
Just, you know, you got to think, you know,
What do you
witty
mean?
comments, you know, do need, refreshing.
My witty comments come in the form of rebuttals to the things that you say.
Oh, I see. That is.
That
When
was a
did that
fancy
start
way of
happening?
saying you're
missed
just
that.
lucky I'm here.
Well, it was when you started being wrong, which was like episode 1. So
Ooh,
And I wasn't even
shots
there.
Fired.
How brilliant is that? I wasn't even there.
see, that's right. I was
That
back and forth
reminds me-
with you before you even showed up.
Yeah, that reminds me of a mate of mine who he was telling me about how his wife was angry with him, and then I said to him, "Flipping out, what have you done now?" And he goes, "No, you don't understand. My wife was born angry with me. She just didn't know it, and then she met me, and then she realized why she was so angry all the time."
Yeah.
I gotta tell my wife that one.
Right.
I must be your wife, Majid.
Yes. Yeah. A bit less facial hair, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
Just a bit.
Just a bit, yeah. So Eric, was that a? I mean, come on, I'm Indian, yeah. We're the hairiest people in the world, in the hottest part of the world.
Yeah, but that's a nice haircut you got there. I got to admit.
Yeah, well, I was again at the Kurdish barbers, and again they were
so
doing their
jealous.
artistry, and this time I didn't do the whole waxing me nose and all that sort of stuff. After I've still got PTSD from last time, so no thanks. I'll just have nose hair. It's fine. Do you know what I mean?
Gosh.
I'm in my 40s now. I'm
Feels like
allowed
you had
to.
a good going over whenever he's done with you.
Oh yeah, man, definitely. Eric, is that your Amazfit watch that you had on? I just saw you
It
put on.
is. Yeah.
Excellent. Are you amazed by it?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
tight.
Does it fit
I'm
amazingly?
I have to tell you that compared to the Pixel Watch 3, which of
Well, that's
course
not
is
saying
the
too
full
much.
fat, well, it's the Wear OS full fat, Amazon, Android experience, right?
Same thing, right?
I have to say that this is, for being its own little thing, like Zep OS, which is a complete, one-off sort of Amazfit product, I guess, for all their watches. Like, it does everything that Wear OS did, with very few exceptions. Obviously, they have a different assistant, and it doesn't have some of the Fitbit capabilities.
It's not
but I think
Bixby.
no.
No.
You never had
That's-
Bixby? That's a Samsung thing, right? That's
Yeah.
Wear
Yeah.
OS, isn't it? Or is that
I use
Google?
Yeah.
Bixby.
Yeah.
I use
Yeah.
Bixby.
This is actually
because-
way more. The assistant on here is actually way more helpful, because anything that the watch can do, you could basically tell it to do. So you can tell it to change a setting, or start a conversation, or pause your music, or like all the things that you can literally touch with your finger.
See, that was the
It will-
dream with Bixby. That was the dream with Bixby. At least,
Well-
Samsung's dream.
But they
The
messed
idea
up by
that-
calling it Bixby.
Yeah, I mean, that was a
Well,
stupid
you
name.
say that, but I started
say it
using
again, Bill.
Bixby about a year ago because it is tough having "Hey Google" as your. Sorry for anybody that I messed up there.
Yeah, a thousand.
Thanks, Bill.
When you
Hey, Google, what
when
is
you
macaroni
listen
and
to
cheese?
when you listen
Hey,
to
Gemini.
Linux and tech
Hey Siri,
podcasts
you must
all
get them
day,
all in.
you listen to these podcasts all day, and they're talking about Google left and right. Every time they do, your phone lights up. So I had to change to
No,
Bixby. And
Let me
everybody's
say
had,
Alexa as well. Hey Alexa, 'cause then
yeah,
you just wanna
everybody's had
get them all
8
in.
years. Everybody's had 8 years to figure this out. If you're still getting your thing
Yeah.
lit up by podcasts or whatever, it's kind of on you at this point.
It is.
Yeah, I think
Come up with a different thing to say than
Yeah.
the G word.
I mean, I think it's interesting what you're saying, Eric, because as I was messaging you earlier this week as well, so my wife has been wanting to get into fitness and all this kind of stuff, and so she started some program, and part of it is seeing what your heart rate does and things like that. So I said, well, why don't you get a smartwatch? And she's like, well, I don't really want a smartwatch. I don't, I'm not that bothered. I just need someone to check my heart rate and stuff. And I went, look, you can get something really cheap. We don't have to buy a proper Fitbit or a Galaxy Watch or whatever. So I found it's called Dafit. It's basically some Chinese brand.
Aren't they all?
Yeah, they are. But I mean, but it was £17. So what, $20, right? And I said to her, look, it's apparently it says on here it can check your heart rate and it can do your SpO2, and it's got timers and stuff, and that what more do you need? And she was like, okay, fine. If it's only that $20, then go ahead. So I bought it. It came the next day. I bought it in pink, so she's happy because it's pink. It looks like an Apple Watch. It's clearly a clone. And it's amazingly capable because it is to all intents and purposes, it does 90% of what a smartwatch does. Yes, you can move your music,
Just a
if you're
clever
listening.
watch.
Yeah, you can, change
Smart
your
enough.
music, for example. You can
Smart
make
enough
phone
watch.
calls on it. You can get notifications on it. You can, and it does do your SpO2.
Sounds
and all
like
this
a
kind of stuff.
solid C student,
Exactly. But I mean,
Well,
think about the price differential. We're talking $20 here. The cheapest Google Fitbit that you can buy is £180. So what, $200?
Yeah.
I mean, are you
Taking
telling me
real
this
cues
is not
from-
10%? This is not
So-
10% of a Fitbit. It's 90% of a Fitbit.
Right. So I
You
think,
know what I
and
mean?
that's exactly true. You're talking in the high 90th percentile in terms of like feature parity. And also you tend to get, this has at least a week, and that's with the
Yeah.
display on, always
Yeah.
on, weak battery. Whereas the Google one is like a day and a half if you're lucky, and you have like battery,
Anxiety.
conserving battery features and like every, like barely touch it. Like it's just, Wear OS is too much for your wrist, I think, for what you're trading off. So this was my my venture out into like third party, sort of when the technology is kind of like bleeds or what is it, trickles down into the secondary market, kind of is the way I look at it. Like, because everything's made in China, all of the designs are incestuous. Like that sensor that's on the bottom of here that that checks your pulse and all of that stuff, those are sort of generational technologies, right? Just like Bluetooth is, right? And this is another great example. Good Bluetooth headbuds or earbuds used to be at least $100, right? And if you got the ones that were 20, they were absolute garbage, right? And now, several generations later, the $20 ones like these are perfectly fine. They work. They're the 95% solution, right? And that's exactly what's happening with watches. They've been around long enough that these technologies are starting to, trickle down from the high end sort of like flagship versions of watches down into the lower tier. And like that CMF watch you got is the same
Yeah,
exact thing, you
exactly. I
know?
mean, so I got a CMF watch about 2 3 months ago on a Black Friday deal, and I was very impressed with it because it was what, $60, and it did, all the kind of basic smartwatchy things, but not, full on. You couldn't reply to a notification, for example. You couldn't start a phone call from your wrist, but as I said, 90% of it did. Now, the interesting thing I found was when my wife's one came through, they looked pretty identical to the extent that the charging puck was the same as well.
Hmm.
And the if you look at the way that the operating system and the features are on there, all you can say is that it's just another skin. It's not. The
Right.
paradigm is exactly the same, and so I think we've got to that stage now where there are big factories in China, whatever, that are manufacturing this stuff to order, at
Hmm.
that, and then a company buys, okay, we're buying this and we're going to put our stamp on it and then we're going to
Yep.
sell it, you know.
Yep.
And it's not a case of people doing their own R&D and coming up with their own thing. They're taking stuff off the
Or,
shelf, as
or
it
or
were.
just a bit, right? You're taking like that hardware development kit that you can
Yep.
buy from who knows, from whatever manufacturer that's allowing you to white label stuff. And
Hmm.
yeah, you're basically taking it, and you may have a little bit of engineering that you tweak it to fit your brand or your whatever you're trying to, whatever feature you're trying to push as being like the important thing. And and yeah, but the underlying, and that's kind of what I'm saying, like the underlying technology that's in those sensors or that's in those chips or that's in the battery technology or that's in the screens and all of it is just consolidation of those pieces of technology. And you're right, the way it's all designed and manufactured in China is it's really open. It's sort of the opposite of the way we do things, where everything is so closed and patent encumbered and intellectual property. Whereas over there really kind of isn't that concept, and
Yeah, people
like,
rip each
you
other off
could,
all the time.
well, you could see it as being a ripoff, or you could see
It's
it
the
as,
open
well,
source idea.
right, you're taking something and you are adding some sort of value to it, either by making it less expensive, which tends to be
Or
sort of that
not.
race to
You
the
just
bottom,
change the
or not.
logo.
Exactly. Or you find a different way to spin something and make it, you spend more on marketing. I mean, whatever
We
it
made it
is. And
orange.
yeah, yeah,
That's it.
exactly. I mean,
So
and I'm not gonna lie, like I like the orange band. Like, it's dumb, but and for the price of this, like, I think it's a very solid piece of equipment. Like the hardware is fantastic. Like the screen is 2000 nits. You can see it very clearly in bright sunlight. It does exactly, like, I actually really, compared to Fitbit, I like this Zep app, this way that they're presenting the information. Like, it makes sense to me more than Fitbit did. And this is like a real minimal thing, but it's a dark app, whereas Fitbit is only white, and that drives me absolutely crazy. So,
yeah,
but
Fitbit being owned by Google, so you would have
by
thought that it
Google,
would
and
work
yeah,
well on a Google
and not
phone.
Well,
So not to
maybe
go until
I think maybe Fitbit just needs to get the new ChatGPT o1 model to do their coding for them, and then maybe you'll get a dark screen, dark mode.
it can't be that hard. It just can't be.
Well, that's
But
why
anyway,
o1 is going to do it for us. I thank you, ChatGPT. Sponsored by ChatGPT. No, we're
yeah.
not.
But it is kind of fascinating to see like how that technology does. Like there's that sort of, some major company does some R&D to come up with something that is truly new and like revolutionary.
I gotta admit, I was
Excuse me?
looking here on Amazon just at smartwatches in general, and how
Mhm.
many very capable devices are $29, $39
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
all of the features that we talked
There's a
about
Tozo
wanting.
that's
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric's point is correct. We've got to that stage where the the cheap stuff has become good, and the good stuff has
mhm.
become cheap.
Yeah.
I
It's. I
mean
mean,
you can
I
buy
mean, you could make that argument with phones, for example, and even with quite a lot of computers as well. That really,
Yeah.
you can get a lot of stuff done at the lower end of the market. Really,
like I
that's
think
not
if
where.
you
That's why
care enough.
That's why the companies are pushing things like AI in phones or in laptops and stuff, because they know that you can get something that's a third of the price of the premium thing and get 95% of the functionality.
Right.
So they're trying to make you want to do other stuff that you
And
now
that's just
need the
it. Like
newest hotness for.
there has to be some major difference. I mean, again, I think a lot of people might just walk into Best Buy or just have that mentality of like what brand has like they just have a Samsung phone, so they're going to get a Galaxy Watch, or they
Yeah, I think
have,
that's
Mhm.
very huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and of course, if you're an Apple user, you're just going to get an Apple Watch. Why would you even consider anything else?
I mean,
Right.
I'm amazed by how many Apple Watch Ultras there are out in the field. I see them regularly, and it's like, are you really diving and mountaineering and needing satellite connectivity that
It's,
you need to
listen,
have
it's
that
just like
for?
people. How many people have
Nah,
an
man,
SUV
they
or a
got it
four-wheel
for.
drive vehicle that they ever take off road?
It was for the
Yeah.
battery life, dude.
It's not about
You get like a whole other day with it. That's pretty much it.
it's about flexing.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
true. It's about flexing. Show off those guns. Ooh, bad pun. Shouldn't have thought to come up with that one on an American podcast. Okay,
That's
let's move
right.
swiftly on.
We're
No, it's fine. We love
international.
them.
We are an
Yeah,
international podcast
yeah.
for all the people.
So after being bullied and harassed by Bill, and actually that's not the case.
Oh my.
Just being
It is. He's just downplaying it.
just gently assuaged. I finally got myself a domain name now, because I'm going
Oh
to
yeah.
relaunch. I'm going to do season 2 of the podcast. You see.
Ah.
The
And
atypical.
so it's atypicaldoctor.com, as in all one word, doctor as in the full doctor, not dr.
Mhm.
And I got that relatively cheap as well. It was about
All right.
what,
Let's go.
$11. But the thing is,
Doctor.com.
and it just comes out.
Your
Contents
web
cannot be
server's down.
displayed.
Your web server's
Content.
down.
We haven't
I don't
built
have
a
a web
server.
server. I haven't got a web
Oh,
server yet.
He ain't even
Oh
This is
got.
my
yes, you
point. I was going to
do.
say.
He ain't
You
even
do
got his
have a web
DNS
server.
set up yet.
Oh,
So,
there's a web server back here, my man.
is there?
Well, whoever your domain registrar is running this
Uh,
page on it.
Namecheap is the
Yeah.
people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Same
which
here.
yeah. I mean, I was impressed at how cheap it was, because
That's
before.
only for the first month. Don't be fooled.
Well, okay, interesting.
I mean, first year.
Interesting story about that. Interesting
No, they're
story
not
about
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
They've
Okay.
not raised any mind, but then again,
So
Yeah, they
After
haven't.
the first year,
so
they
when
do.
I initially saw Atypical Doctor, right, and that was for like $8 for the first year, and I was like, brilliant, yeah, and then and $80 from year 2, 3, 4 onwards,
Right.
and I was like, okay, fine. So then I found one which was okay. It was $10, $11, but it would stay at $10, $11 for perpetuity, or however long, I decided to keep it. Now, so when I started my, as it was called, the Atypical Anesthetist podcast, I was just using Spotify, because Spotify had a podcasters thing on there. It used to be called Anchor, then they called it Podcasters for Spotify. Now it's called Creators for Spotify, I think. Something like that. Anyway.
And now it's called Spotify is milking you and injecting advertisements all the time. Yeah, no big deal. Yeah, it's really good. I've enjoyed the arc of Spotify.
Yeah. Anyway, so then so I had them all up on that, and then after some time, I thought to myself, you know what, I should probably do this properly. And people were asking me, what's the RSS feed, and is it only on Spotify? Oh well, I haven't got Spotify. I mean,
Yeah.
not that, as I said, thousands of people are listening to it anyway, but
There would be if you had an RSS feed.
Well, so that's what
you'd
I
be
thought.
on Apple, and
Yeah,
then you
so-
would exist.
Yeah,
So then I got a RSS feed through RSS.com.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
yeah, and they were charging like £15 a month.
Ew.
Yeah, which I thought was a bit much.
Ew.
But then in the end, I thought, okay, well, all right, so I got all my podcasts off Spotify, and then had to then convert them into MP3s and all this kind of stuff, and then put them up on the RSS feed and whatever. And then after a while, I forgot to renew it, and then it's like £15. Oh, forget it. And as it is, I'm doing OTC and Mintcast, and maybe it's time to
Bill's
retire.
just sitting there, by the way. Look at his face.
Yeah.
He's just sitting there, smug as hell.
Yeah. So
Like,
anyway,
yeah, I
Well,
do all
we're
of this
gonna get
stuff
him set up.
every week. What do you mean? This is very normal stuff to do.
No.
I did.
Anyway,
Don't
so
try
I
to do it
find it.
yourself. Just get
Yeah,
find hosting that does it for you, that you're happy
Fireside, $10 a month. Just be done with it.
In other words,
Seriously.
Bill's server. Bill's server.
Or
dot
Bill's
com.
server.
Well, that's why
Bill's
I
Docker
asked
container.
Bill about web hosting, and he's like, I can do it. And I'm like, oh, really?
I get
Okay.
myself into this every
that's
time.
where the face was coming from.
Yeah.
You were waiting for it.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
Bill's
we can just have the WordPress plug-in, the same thing we use on these shows, create the RSS feed, and then all he's got to do is, depending on where he wants to actually put the file, if you could even do the thing like we do here, where you could put it on.
You just put it on
archive.
Bill's hard drive. Yeah.
No, we ain't doing that.
Oh yeah, we are.
We ain't doing that. I am not
Look,
having
Majid's
my
gonna
hard
send
drive
you-
get hit.
Majid's gonna send you a 1 terabyte hard drive, and then you just back it up on the regular. No big deal.
Yeah, that was everybody's idea in the beginning when we were switching Mintcast over. Well, can't we just put this all on? Yeah, we could. But if you want to DDoS my server every day that we release a show, that's exactly.
It's a sign of popularity, Bill.
Yeah,
You should take
I
it as a
suppose it
compliment.
is.
Okay. So my noobness is starting to show up now. All right. So one of the things I did after registering the domain name, and then Bill saying, I can host it for you. I was still a bit like, okay, so what pieces of technology now have to come into play for this to work? What things do I need?
Basically,
right? Now, it's because I'm thinking of using this as a bit of a learning thing as well. Because yes, you're right, Leo. I can just pay someone. David, the Namecheap was saying, £3 or £4 a month, and they'll do it. But it's like, I actually want to learn a little bit, and how do you host a website? How do you put audio files on there? Things like that. I just think that would be a good learning thing for me.
well, the
You know what
audio
would be-
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, if you really want to learn it, like, set up a virtual instance of Ubuntu server. Use their what is it, Snap, to install the LEMP stack. So you get your full set of server components, and then run through the install of WordPress. And like,
You can actually do a one-click install of WordPress.
It's not so overwhelmingly difficult that you're going to spend like a month figuring it out, but it will be a couple days of just sort of, because I think the important part that people overlook is like, what are the back end, like, foundational components of our website?
Yeah.
Like, you have the web server, and that's what's hosting your files of the website. Then if you have any sort of a database, like a CMS is going to have a relational database of some kind, and that's going to be, MariaDB or, something like that. And so that's the secondary sort of component. So you have those two things. And then the networking aspect of it, like, how does my domain, like when someone hits that, how does it route? So where am I hosting the DNS configuration, whether that's at Namecheap or you use Cloudflare or some third party.
I thought you said it wasn't complex. Hang on. What?
It's really not, though. that's
He's
the
just
thing.
explaining what happens on the back
Look
end.
look
you
at
just
Roger's
slice it
face.
up.
He's just done. He's
No,
already
no, I'm
checked
just
out.
no. I'm thinking. I'm trying to.
You slice it
I'm
into
trying
little
to
pieces.
because I'm one of these guys that always tries to conceptualize things and understand them.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
So
It's a whole meal.
so-
It's a whole
so-
meal of things, and you just take one little bite at a time, and you say, okay,
Just simplify
what
a little
pieces-
bit. When
yeah.
he's talking about the DNS, you'll just tell. We'll for right now we could leave.
you bought the domain name,
Yeah.
right? It's right now. It's parked. It's not pointing to
not going anywhere.
So you would go in. You'd go into your control panel and Namecheap, and there's a DNS setting, and basically there are different types of records, and this is where it can be a little more complicated. But basically, you just need either a C name or an A record that points that you give it an IP address. So if you've got stuff on Bill's system, then Bill's going to give you an IP address, and you're going to put it in there. And then whenever you go to that domain name, the translation is such that it says, okay, Modges.com, whatever, is this IP address. And then it shoots it, it sends the request off to Bill's server or wherever you've got it hosted. And then, so that's the first part of it. And that's really all there is to it. You don't have, there's nothing more in depth to it than that necessarily, unless you're setting up email. And then that's another thing that you have to do with DNS. But then you start looking, okay, what's the server part of it? If you want to use WordPress, if you want to use something else, then that's what the decision you need to make. And then, okay, what does it take to run WordPress? Okay, I need a web server and a database server. So anyway,
So
it's really not that complicated.
So could I run all of this stuff off a Raspberry Pi?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can run it off of a virtual machine if you want.
Keep in mind, we joke around about where the files are at, but you do not want the files to sit on my system or yours. You want them sitting somewhere that's got load balancing, that's doing.
If you're serving podcast files, that's a different.
Yeah,
I will say that it would be an educational experience to serve the files there locally and see what happens.
I was going to say,
you got to share your internet
with
with your family, maybe not, but yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, here's the natural progression of that is, okay, well, then how do I put kind of like, how do I slow that down some so that I'm never in a situation where I'm like, oh no,
yeah,
I'm not because people are downloading my podcast, right? Like, this is where I sit.
Okay, I
on this
see.
kind of thing.
I see now. So because if you've got the files on your own physical hardware on your own network, whenever anybody's coming now to listen to said podcast or wants to download it or whatever, they're downloading it off my connection.
Yeah,
exactly.
And hence that's going to then destroy my internet in my house.
It can.
Exactly.
It can, but that's where you get into some of the solutions.
You can set it up.
How do I slow that down? Connections to this particular, to the gateway outbound, those are limited to a small amount of bandwidth.
You're getting a little above my head with this stuff.
Well, but this is what IT is, right? It is a series of problems or challenges that you then have to figure out solutions for. That's all there is to it. Yeah. It's problem solving. And it's not like any one person knows everything about IT. It's that you have the resourcefulness to know, like, okay, well, how do I even phrase this as a question to start getting the right answer? And then coming up with, like, okay, what's a possible solution? Like, let me try some sort of load balancing or some sort of, like, proxies, way to sort of,
Okay, so just go back one second. Just going back a little bit. So, okay, so now I understand why I don't want it on my own physical hardware. So
you may not want it on your own phase.
Yeah, okay, I might not want. And as Bill is saying, it should be somewhere else. Where exactly is this somewhere else? Is this
well, we use archive.org.
Have you ever heard of a content delivery network, a CDN?
No.
Okay, so there are CDNs, and they're basically like hard drives that are meant specifically for fast access for stuff that's housed on like a website or a file exchange or something like that. Or so basically what it does is it takes, when there's a request for that file, instead of it being on your physical hardware, it's stored somewhere out in the cloud.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when that request is made of your user to download something, to load an image, whatever it is, it goes out to that content delivery network, and then they're usually spread out across the globe, so that you use it depends on the type of CDN you're using, but a lot of them will be co-located in different data centers so that it's closest to the user, and that's what they'll do is like the generic URL that the user's going to will be pointed to the right place depending on where they are geographically. And then that's how Netflix and that's how these services are able to serve files and have it, I mean, theirs is way more complicated than anything you ever do. But the gist of it being that there are...
The concept is like that. Okay.
Your content is cached all over wherever.
Exactly.
And you can control where in some cases. These are usually paid for services.
When you're using a podcast host, that's what they're doing. They have their servers and their service on one set of hardware, but all of the data, all of the files are going to be somewhere else on a content delivery network, whether it's one that they operate or one they pay for.
Like what we were using.
Does that mean I then have to get a content delivery network server as well, or
you can just use Amazon S3 or something?
Yeah.
Or you could use could use a podcast service that has a free tier like Red Circle or something like that. I mean, these are services that are made just for podcasts, and they go through. They take you through the step by step through sharing your RSS. They actually create the RSS feed for you. So we wouldn't, if you went that route, we wouldn't have to create the RSS feed on the website like we do with this show and Mintcast. We could use their RSS feed. The reason I stopped doing that was basically to take ownership of it, because right now, like a show like Three Fat Truckers or like this show was in the beginning when we first set it up, if you looked at the RSS feed for it, it would say redcircle.com and then a big hash of letters and numbers and whatever. Whereas if you go the route of generating the RSS feed through your website, you'll have like atypicaldoctor.com and then the hash, or even simpler, depending on how you set it up.
And that's not necessarily 100% true, because some hosts will let you actually use your own domain.
Well, yeah, Blueberry does.
Yeah. So even though it's on their servers, it's still your domain. And
typically, again, paid for services, though.
Right. But the reason that it's important, I think, personally, to control your own domain is, let's say you're using a host and for some reason they stop providing service or they go belly up or something like that. And the only way that anyone has any access to your content is through that Red Circle link. Whereas if you had abstracted that up to using your domain and then just have it be a pointer to that, if that backend goes away, you can replace it with something else and then just change the pointer.
And that
makes it so much easier to because there's a concept of like when you go to a 404 on the internet, it just means this thing isn't here anymore. And that's basically because at some point it was here, but things changed somehow and now it's not there. And in a lot of cases, it's because they didn't think ahead, like, oh, well, if I'm not using this anymore, how do these links still work at some point?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's part of the reason for me moving away from Spotify, because of the fact that I felt that I didn't have any control over anything. And if Spotify decided to delete everything, they could. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, and that's when I even realized that, shit, I haven't even got the files anymore. You know, the actual podcast. You know,
people go through that on like YouTube and stuff, right? I mean, they have a decade worth of content out there, and then all of us, then they don't have backups of it because it can be prohibitively expensive to have, that much data, especially if you don't know what you're doing.
A good example of what Eric was talking about was when we were having all that trouble with archive.org and they had been hacked and whatnot. And our RSS feed, because it's built from our own website, our own domain, it didn't matter where that file was sitting, because all I needed to do was point the post on the website to somewhere else. And in our case, we use Red Circle as kind of a backup. And it from the listener's point of view, nothing changes, because the show still gets downloaded exactly the same way through the website, through the domain name, and they still get their downloaded show. So that's, you got a lot more flexibility when you're doing your own thing. You got more learning and more work involved, but I mean, there you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, I think it's important that I do learn some of this stuff. Really, if I'm gonna do it properly. He says.
Even
Yeah.
if you just understand it in concept, and I think this is kind of where I have a problem with some of the modern approaches to DevOps and
I'm
development.
going to go
is
you
that-
one further when you're done with this, Eric.
It is that we've abstracted so much of the technology to a point where everything's a service or an API, and basically, you're in the thing that you need to do the work in, but you don't understand any of the underlying technology. So when something isn't working the way you expect it to, like you have no ability to understand why. Like you're just literally just stuck there. Like, well, what do I do now?
And you've
Well,
got nobody working for you that does either because
Right.
you've went with this
So-
API or whatever.
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So this is where I'm going to say don't even bother with a database. Don't even bother with PHP. So Eric had mentioned set up a LAMP stack or LEMP, I guess, if you want to use Nginx. But I think that for someone just starting out and trying to understand what's going on the web is too much. I say just run a web server. Take your pick. Nginx seems to be the most popular right now, especially because of the ability to do fancy things like load balancing. Not that Apache can't do it. I think just Nginx was at the forefront at the time when these things were really starting to get popular. So pick a web server and learn a little bit of HTML. You don't even have to actually learn the HTML, but then you're running into the trouble of, you're abstracting it away with these, what you see is what you get, or you'll see WYSIWYG editors, where you just you drag your photo in there, you type your text or whatever, you're kind of playing around with it like you would Microsoft Word or whatever. And then you're like, all right, cool, publish. And then it'll just copy it over to your web server in raw HTML. And then when you go to your website, you see it the way that you saw it. And I don't necessarily think that's too big of a leap for someone just starting out, but I would say follow it the code wise. Like actually look. You can do view source, right? Like after you publish it, you just view source on any web page and see how it's actually built. And that should be the same thing that your editor uploaded. But you're going to see a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily immediately make sense, and just kind of going back and figuring out what's going on to where either A, you don't need the WYSIWYG editor anymore, or B, you know exactly what it's doing every single time when you do anything. And there's no more abstraction behind that. Like, if it breaks, you see the raw bits that go together, and you'd be able to fix it.
Distributing
And
a
then at that
podcast like
point-
that would be a lot of fun, though.
Oh, it would. Oh, well, yeah. I get paid to do that, though. So
Yeah,
But,
I
like-
think I could do it if I had to. I think it'd be a lot. Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely fun because then you get to go in depth of what Eric is saying about. Oh, we'll just stand up a LEMP stack. Well, what does that actually mean? And what are those four things? And how do you plug them in together? And why would you want to plug them in this way? It gets really in depth, really, really fast. And that's kind of why I was poking at him about the complexity or whatever. Like, it's not complex on the surface because you have Linux, the operating system. You have Nginx, the web server, it just posts stuff out on the web. You have IM, so MySQL or MariaDB or whatever, just a database sitting in the back, maintaining all of the things that you've ever saved, ever. And then there's PHP, which is the glue that glues the Linux, the web server, and the database together so that they can all communicate back and forth. PHP is the language that these things use to speak to each other. And then diving deep, like that's already kind of complex enough. That's four things working together. And if anything breaks, you're kind of up a creek, right? Then you got to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it gets really, really interesting. But I do think it's very, very complex. Because I think when you're diving into stuff like that, you don't just want to see how it works. You want to know how it works. And when you get that weird, what is a 503? I don't even know what that is. You'll at least know what that is, so that, as Bill was saying, you can formulate the question that you can kind of ask, whether it's ChatGPT or Stack Overflow or wherever you go to ask a question. You'll at least sound halfway intelligent, like you know what you're talking about, and then get a good answer. Because if there's one thing that I've learned on the internet is that asking terrible questions just gets you flack. Oh, not the
sure
audio
does.
file. Yeah.
It's like people are
The
scared
good-
of it.
The good part, though, is that in terms of something that a regular person would ever want to do from like a server perspective, running a website is probably very high up in terms of like
Yeah.
achievable and also well documented things, because it's just something that, okay, you're at a company that you don't really have an IT guy, but you're like you're an assistant or something, and someone says, we need a website, like figure it out, and like, so of course there are plenty of options for just having things hosted for you and all of that. But then in terms of like, if you wanted to do it yourself, if someone said, okay, well, go get a DigitalOcean account and then set up a server, and so if you go to DigitalOcean, there's a lot of great documentation on like how to set up WordPress. And,
they paid people to write
specific,
that documentation. It is good for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And
in
so
fact,
like DigitalOcean is a great resource
some
for
of the
that kind of
best,
stuff.
documentation out there.
Yep, absolutely.
Docker Compose up WordPress. That's how you do it.
Oh my God! Then you got to deal with sockets and ports.
You'll never be able to
forwarding
fix
and
anything.
That's how
Where's the
every single
storage?
one of my websites are ran.
Bill, where's the actual storage? How would I even know?
It's in the Docker Compose.
What? A
That's
config
exactly-
file is not in the same place as everything else? What
Nah.
do you mean?
Docker
And
Compose.
that's what made me dislike Docker at first, was because of how complicated it made things that I knew how to do intimately.
Yeah.
It abstracted it away and made it so complicated. I was like, oh, I don't like this at all.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I honestly, it really enticed me early on. But it wasn't until Compose actually really made, it was in beta, I believe, that I ever really took a real hard look at, okay, well, so then how would I actually do this or whatever?
Yeah.
But while it does abstract away some stuff, Docker in general, Docker Compose, I think, kind of brings a lot of that back to the forefront, where you're
you can
pointing
read it
at
like a book.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and because it's easy to say, all right, the storage inside of the container is actually living right here, and right here, that's where it really shines, because right here can be absolutely anywhere. And like, I've moved my Docker containers from one device to another device, and I mean, and we're talking no backup, no failover. There's no, like, if I break this, it's just down. But
Yeah.
we're talking, the whole process was like 6 minutes, and 5 of those minutes was moving the data.
Yeah.
And I was able to just say, yep, Docker Compose, bring that up. And then it was just running on a whole new machine, different operating system, different file system layout, different file system.
Yeah.
And yet Docker was like, I don't care about any of that. We're running. Cool.
That and all your database stuff is declared in the Docker Compose. You ain't got to set up none of that. I mean, it's
You just need to
No,
make sure
it
that
is.
you got to
where
have
your
the ports
storage
set
says
up.
it is.
the steps,
Yeah.
right.
Where your storage says it is
There-
like exists and all of that.
The
Yeah,
problem
that's
I
about
have
it.
is that if you go to Docker Hub and you just download an image, there are a lot
there's
of
your first
assumptions
problem.
made. Well, that's just it. There's a lot of assumptions that are made for you.
Yes.
And if you don't understand what they are and you just plow ahead,
Yes.
and let's say you
Yeah,
just
you
use
can't
that
do
image
that.
and you set everything up, and like the storage is not permanent, right? Or at least mapped the right way.
Right.
And then for some reason you shut it off, it gets destroyed. Like, it will just be gone. All the work you did is just no longer there.
yeah, exactly.
And that's that leaves a bad taste in someone's mouth whenever they're starting out. And
well, you don't put
feel like-
Docker in your mouth, first of all. But second of all,
You get that out of your mouth.
but this is exactly why I'm saying HTML and CSS, right? Like, learn the basics of both of those things, and then stick a database on it, and then learn where PHP comes in, and you just kind of build yourself up until you're at the point where you're like, I know all these words, I'll just run it in Docker.
However, since our goal is to get a podcast up and running, more
Basic
than
HTML
learning how
and
to
CSS, hard code your damn XML file, and then just put it at a typicaldoctor.com/RSS. That's it. And by the way, that just means creating a folder named RSS in your web directory and sticking the XML file in there called feed.xml or whatever it is.
But you want a nice website that people can go to and see your episodes and link to
Do you
show
really
notes.
think, do you
and-
really think that going to, and I don't even want to call it janky, because HTML looks fine if you do some very basic things, right? Like choose a font. That is not difficult. And even if you don't, what is it? It's Times New Roman. People are going to be like, oh, I'm back in high school. Great. But, do some basic headings, make some big stuff, make some little stuff. make a link. And I don't think that if someone is interested in hearing what Majid has to say about anesthesia or whatever, I don't know what you would get into that podcast, but if they want to hear what you want to say, then I don't think
medicine is the one thing I don't talk about.
Oh, okay, well, good, because I wouldn't know what any of it meant. But I mean, I don't think that's the thing that's going to turn them away, right? Like if the content itself is interesting, I don't think Times New Roman is going to be the thing to run you off. Keep it simple, then add pretty.
Well, we're going to get him something up and running.
Yeah, I'm hoping Bill's going to hold my hand through all this.
Yeah, we'll get you something running.
You open up a notepad or VS Code. VS Code's really good. Open up VS Code, save a file as HTML, get yourself the skeleton off the internet where it's like, the HTML tag and the head tag and the body tag and all that stuff, and just start typing stuff. You're gonna be fine. It's really fun, I think. And Eric was saying that that it's some of it's rewarding. I think web development or just kind of easing yourself into it is probably the most rewarding thing that you could do because it's instant. There's no waiting, there's no submitting, there's no.
The first time you see something pop up on the internet that you made, is an experience that, especially if you don't do that kind of stuff for a living, and it's still, I am shocked to this day that I am smart enough to pull any one of these things off, let alone all of them together, and then keep it running for years on end. I am still shocked. So when I put something on the internet, that the reward, the dopamine fix that I'm getting by seeing that, I mean, it is.
I, for one, am not shocked, Bill. You're a smart guy. For all the shit I give you, you're a pretty clever dude.
I don't. But there it is. It is worth the effort to learn these things. And he's right. When it comes down to it, the only thing WordPress is doing is creating a rather convoluted HTML file sitting in your
mess
bar
of JavaScript because somebody had to have a terrible ticker going across the top that you're not even using. Yeah, I think WordPress is absolute overkill for something very, very simple. But the really cool thing about HTML and CSS, and I think this is why I've been getting back into it here recently, is because HTML and CSS have become immensely more capable over the past decade than the reason that JavaScript exists right now, that it got its springboard into dominating every single web technology that exists right now. The reason that it even exists in the first place is because HTML and CSS were not capable of doing what I mentioned, putting a ticker and scrolling it across. Like, there were some marquee things, but that was an Internet Explorer thing back in the 90s where only Internet Explorer... Remember those little tags at the bottom of the websites where it was like, optimized for Internet Explorer 4?
How could we forget?
Yeah, it was because Internet Explorer decided they wanted to do an end run around the WC3, and we're like, we're just gonna, or W3C, and we're like, we're just gonna make up our own tags. But they were trying to dominate the entire internet at the time. Well, anyway, HTML and CSS, I think back in version 3 and 4, just weren't capable of doing some of the fancy type animated type things that HTML5 can do. So depending on what you're after, unless you're trying to do some like very specific calculations or mathematics on your website or something like that, you don't even need JavaScript. You can keep it extremely simple and make it look extremely good. I've got there's a website, and if you're at work, mute me. It's like your fucking website's ugly or something like that. I forget what it is. I'm gonna have to find this, but it is a website dedicated to telling you that it being ugly is not that big of a deal. And the way to make it not ugly is actually very easy, and you don't need JavaScript, you don't need a database, you don't need all this other kind of stuff. I'll need to find this website though. So I'll stick it in the OTC Discord, and then maybe we can get it into the show notes as well before it all gets published up. But I'll find it. And there's been like 3 iterations on it. So like each one is like, the other one was good, but this one is better. Here's some pointers, and here's some pointers, and here's some pointers.
You've got me interested in, and I wish I had more time in my life to sit down and learn to make decent static websites without all the database, without the.
Found it. It's motherfucking website. Sorry.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
There's okay. So motherfucking website, better motherfucking website, and then I think there's another one called best motherfucking website or something like that. And it's .com. All of those are .com. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, the first one is what I'm telling you to do, Majid, is just don't bother. Just put a couple of headings in there, put some text in there, a couple of bullet points in there, whatever. And then the next one adds in a sprinkle of CSS, says, set a background color, do some indentation, use formatting to make your thing readable, make it adaptable to a phone or something like that. And then there's another one that quite literally starts to add in the sprinkles on top. But I would say go through each of those successively, each of those websites, and then decide if something like that is going to work for you. And honestly, 90% of people that want a website, yes, it will.
And these people are eating their own dog food too, because this website is just
it is a testament to what they're saying. That's
no
my favorite thing about these websites.
No nothing.
Yeah.
No need for it.
It's an absolute testament to everything they're saying. They write the post in using the rules they're telling you to use. So, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But
I love
at the very
it.
least, even if you want to go lamp stack and go full WordPress or whatever, it's still worth your time to go through something like this and figure out what it all means and why you would want to do it like that.
How much would this all cost? Because I know my wife's going to ask me this question.
$5 a month if you really want good hosting. That's at
free
maximum.
If you host
can
it
get
with
them
me.
cheaper than that. Yeah, free hosting there.
Yeah, free if it's Bill. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, in general.
So one skill you're going to need to know, and this is a lot of this stuff is terminal based. If you're administering a website remotely, if there isn't a control panel like a WordPress, admin component, like the WordPress admin aspect of the website, you're going to have to use SSH to be able to get in and do work on the file level on the server. Like you got to be able to move. Well, I don't know who's doing it. If Majid really wants to learn how to do it,
yeah,
Bill's going to have to give him SSH website or access to the site.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll just create to get on the website. You can. Well, I've got.
My point being that you have to be comfortable doing stuff on the command line.
To do stuff on the website, if we used WordPress, all he would need is a WordPress login.
Or Bill can stand up cPanel because Bill is smart.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. No, but really, Majid, to be honest with you, I think SSH in, run a couple commands like apt install Apache or apt install Nginx or whatever. And like, seriously, to get this done, the thing that these websites are showing you, that's all you got to do. Literally it. As far as the server side goes. Yes. And then use an SFTP client. So I use a lot of Windows, a lot of Mac. So I'm very familiar with CyberDuck. It's amazing. So I used FileZilla before, but FileZilla didn't have a dark mode for Windows. And then there's like this, oh God, if you go into the forum, it is just a bunch of slang.
Windows?
Well, I use everything.
What's wrong with you?
No, because
this is a Linux podcast for God's sake.
Because I love absolutely everything. Well, but to CyberDuck's credit, they do have a Linux client. It's just command line only. But it's nice. It's very good. So I've paid the guy. I tried to pay him again just because I've used this software so much, and the PayPal button's broken now or something. So I can't send him more money, which is fine. But that's CyberDuck has been fantastic. And then on Linux, I don't even use like a traditional client. I use the file explorer. Like the Plasma just does it. So it's just a directory on the left-hand side in the favorites thing. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't even bother with it.
Apparently I can even do this on my NAS. I forgot that.
Yes, you can. Now the thing
need
that you're going to run into
IP
that
address to
You don't technically. You can use dynamic DNS and just kind of keep up with it or whatever. But this is the when you do that, the thing that you're going to run into is the thing that Bill's going to take care of for you. If you do it on your own, you'll have to do it, which is either port forwarding, which is kind of dangerous, or doing some kind of weird Cloudflare tunnel to where your public IP address is never truly exposed to the real internet. And they'll give you DDoS protection and a bunch of other stuff too. But so there's more deep networking plumbing guts that you're going to need to get into if you want to really truly do it from your own house.
Yeah, maybe not.
Well, I was just going to recommend.
Again, piecemeal it.
We're
let
up
Bill
in
do
the
it for
clouds
now.
here. I mean,
let Bill handle it for you for now, and then set up a second website without a domain. Just access it with an IP address or something like that, and just see if you can poke that hole and make that work and make it accessible.
And I'll give you just enough access to fuck it up proper.
Perfect.
That way, when you do,
Take
you're gonna
snapshots.
have to learn how to.
You know
fix
what?
it.
That's the title of the part. That's the title of the episode.
Fuck it
just
up
enough
proper.
access to F it up.
Oh gosh! All right, well, we better get out of here. We got Moss waiting over on the other side. So, the other side. So let us know what you think.
Asking.
Yeah, he's already asking. Let us know what you
3
think
minutes
of
to
all
go.
this. Yeah. Gosh dang it! Well, he doesn't see anybody, and I don't want him to feel lonely. So.
Lonely.
Anyway, folks, let us know what you think. Show at linuxotc.org. I almost said show at 3ftpodcast.org. Show at linuxotc.org or Discord and Mastodon. Yeah, whichever. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Until then, I've been Bill.
I've been Eric. Sorry.
I'm a guy called Majid.
I'm the other guy called Leo.
Thanks a lot, folks. Thank you to everybody in the live stream.
My God, he is relentless.